I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the new Ford Escape. It's a return for this badge to the landscape after the previous generation, which was a bit of a darling of car journalists, didn't sell very well in Australia at all. And Ford are hoping to change that with this all new generation that clearly is designed to look much more like the Focus small car than the previous version did. But while it has a more soft front end look than before, there's really nothing soft about the Escape's package underneath this short and stubby front bonnet. That's because there's only one engine offered with the Escape in Australia, and it's a 2-litre turbocharged petrol 4-cylinder making 183 kilowatts of power, and that's more than cars like the Volkswagen Tiguan 162 TSI, more than a Toyota RAV4 Hybrid, so out on the road this thing should go pretty hard. And if you're noticing that this one looks a little bit glitzy and glamorous, that's because it's the new Vignale trim. Ford are really having a stab at this kind of semi-premium variant in the mid-size SUV category. And we'll have a look inside to see whether or not this posh Escape really makes sense. Because this one is about $50,000 before on-road costs, but you don't have to spend that much on an Escape if you don't want to. And in fact, there are some pretty good deals on the lower end cars. You can get into a front wheel drive base model that's really more like a lower mid-spec grade in something like a CX-5 for well under $40,000 drive away at the moment. But we're here to talk about the Vignale in the main today because that's the car we're sitting in. And it starts with these really posh leather seats. We have Vignale branding up the top, and we have a lot of this sort of deviated stitching going down the seats. I mean, they do look like kind of a piece out of something a little bit more expensive than a Ford. They're quite soft and cushy. They don't feel like a seat in many other of this car's competitors. So if you do like a really soft and plush seat, it is a car that you should have on your shopping list to test drive, in my opinion. That cool contrast stitching continues to the steering wheel, which, like a classic Ford steering wheel, feels a little bit pudgy and sort of soft in the hand, but it does have a small diameter to it. Feels good. We've got paddle shifters as well. But then the rest of the cabin is very similar to the Focus, to the Fiesta, and to the new Puma as well. There's not too many things that separate the Escape as the bigger and more expensive, and depending on your point of view, that will either matter or not. We've got the same screen as those cars, an 8-inch touchscreen. It's very simple to use. Ford are excellent at making these really intuitive software packages. This one's Sync 3. And we have digital gauges, but they're, I'm not going to say useless, but they definitely haven't tapped into the full potential of this system. You can't put a map there, for example. The trip computer functions look quite basic. In fact, the graphics as a whole look fairly elementary, I would say, so I think they could have taken it a bit further. More stitching and soft materials up on the dash and also on the doors, and quality feels good. Plus, it's quite practical. We have a small bin between the seats with a tray up top, another tray down here that you can remove and clean. It's rubberized. 2 cup holders down here, wireless smartphone charging, a bit more storage, and there's just a bit more room freed up by the fact we have a rotary gear selector rather than a traditional lever, and big door bins as well. Plus, this car comes with B&O sound, which sounds really good actually. Now, this simulated wood won't be for everyone, but I think you guys know by now if you've been a subscriber, that is right up my alley. So I quite like the appearance of the Vignale inside. But what's it like in the back seat? Well, the doors open pretty wide, close with a good thunk too. The Isofix points are easy to find, they're exposed, they don't even have a cap, so there's nothing to lose. And in terms of room on offer for myself at 6 foot, it's good. Even though the Vignale has this very large panoramic sunroof as standard, headroom, I've got a couple of inches, legroom is plentiful behind my own driving position, tow room's really good. The floor is also pretty flat, so you could actually get someone in the middle seat, though it is something of a perch. Air vents, like big air vents in the back, which is really good to see. Heating for the outboard seats, and a USB-C port and a USB 3 port here in the back as well. Now, the seats do have some tricks. They slide so you can free up more boot space if you'd like to. They also recline so you can sit kind of upright with a bit of support, or you can recline really quite far back, which will be good for a road trip in this car, I reckon. Plus, we have a flip down armrest, 2 cup holders there. Door materials remain soft here in the back, unlike most of this car's rivals, so that's quite impressive. And there's just a light, airy feeling. We do have this sort of theatre seating in the back seat, so there's a good view forward. We're not just staring at the kind of back of the headrest in front. So I think families will appreciate those touches. As we head around the back of the Escape Vignale, you can see that they've made quite a statement here in that there's no Escape badge on the top spec car, only Vignale. It might be one of those things where it's like, stop trying to make Vignale happen. It's not going to happen, but we'll see. Depends whether or not they put it on more cars out here in Australia. Now, it's a fairly anonymous design, I reckon. Not sure about this huge plate mount, which seems to come on the cars as standard. It's the size of a European plate, and of course, if you've got Euro plates, that would be fine, but this car is only specified with these small slimline plates, so that looks a bit odd. But, you know, in this flat grey, handsome. You could definitely jazz it up with a brighter color though, of course. Powered tailgate, fairly quick, and it doesn't beep on its way up, unlike a Toyota RAV4. And it reveals a really good sized boot. As you can see, the load lip here is so low, so it's really no effort to get stuff in and out of this boot. It's not the biggest boot in the class, but it is, you know, reasonably spacious. I'll display the literage on screen for you. And in terms of special features, we do have remote releases to drop those back seats all the way down from here in the boot, which is really cool. We've got a 12-volt socket, we've got a couple of shopping bag hooks, and then underneath this boot floor, we have a space saver spare as well. So in terms of being kitted out for country drives, it isn't too bad. Just one button up here to close the boot. We can't lock it and walk away like some other medium SUVs at the top of the range, but a pretty good package. Practical, comfortable. Let me know what you think about the design down below. And now we'll jump into the driver's seat and see how the 2-litre turbocharged Escape goes on the road. So then, what's the new Ford Escape like when you get it out on the road? Because this has actually been a mid-size SUV I've been quite looking forward to driving. Personally, I don't mind the way it looks, and the couple of times that I drove the previous Escape in depth, I always thought it was really underrated. It was like the kind of car guy's SUV, if you like. If you were looking to buy a vehicle about this size and spend 40 or 45 grand, the old Escape kind of drove like a hot hatch. You could either get it in this really sweet, low-powered 1.5 litre version with a manual transmission that felt great. Now that's all gone. Ford have totally rationalised the Escape range down in Australia to only having one engine. There are still 3 trim levels available. There's a base Escape, there's a slightly sporty ST line mid-spec car, and then there's this Vignale flagship car, which is a badge that's been in Europe for a while and is applied to top-end Fords over there, but this is the first time we've seen it in Australia. But all you kind of really need to know is that the base car is sort of like a mid-spec CX-5 equivalent. The ST line is you know, it is a little sporty. It's got a sports suspension, but it's heavily kind of based on the base model, if you like. And then the Vignale is the one that starts to bring in all the luxury features like the electric adjustment, the leather, the wood effect in here, and you know, the panoramic sunroof and all of that sort of thing. But they all have the same engine, and it's a 183 kilowatt EcoBoost 2-litre turbo 4-cylinder petrol, and that's the only one you can get. And so if what you want is a petrol midsize SUV with plenty of power, then the Escape is one of your absolute best bets, because this thing is more powerful than most of its rivals, often by a significant extent. So even cars that have quite a lot of power in petrol form, like the 170 kilowatt CX-5 turbo, or the 162 kilowatt Tiguan 162 TSI, or even the 163 kilowatt RAV4 Hybrid all-wheel drive, the Escape eclipses all of them. And it feels that way out on the road. You know, it's quick in sort of like an effortless pace sort of way. This isn't meant to be a hot SUV. This isn't an Escape ST, even though I think Ford should totally do an Escape ST. I think it would actually be a nice point of difference. It's power in the sense that, like, if you wanted a powerful family car back in the day, then you would always buy the V6 rather than the wheezy sort of 4-cylinder. It's that way with this turbocharged 2-litre Escape. Plenty of go, plenty of torque, and so overtaking on country roads is really easy. Now, interestingly, even though the Ford Escape is built in Europe, they got this engine out of the American spec Escape, so you can't actually get a super powerful turbo petrol Escape in Europe. We get special treatment coming down the production line, and the American spec turbo 2-litre goes into our cars, which is why it's so powerful basically, but it's well suited to Australian conditions. Now, of course, 183 kilowatts going through the front wheels only is always going to be an interesting recipe on wet days, and you can, of course, opt for all-wheel drive in the Escape, which is fitted to this Vignale that I'm driving, but you can also get it on the ST line as well. Now, it's interesting because if you go for all-wheel drive, it does push the ST line's promotional pricing a little bit above 40 grand, whereas the front drive car looks like really good value at under 40. But I think when you're dealing with an engine this potent, all-wheel drive in a car like this is a good idea. As for ride and handling though, the Escape is a classic Ford product in that it is a little sportier, a little more feelsome, a little more hunkered down than most of its rivals. I would say the suspension tune on this car is actually a little bit firmer than a Tiguan R-Line, for example, and that's been a popular car in Australia over the last few years. So I think there is a bit of an appetite for an SUV that looks a bit sportier, that has a sport suspension but isn't a luxury product. And we're starting to see a few manufacturers dip a toe in that water. Hyundai have said they're interested in doing a Tucson N, for example. There is a new Tiguan R. We don't know whether that's going to come to Australia, but the Escape is kind of hovering at the low end of that idea right now. And so if you do like good steering, if you do like ride quality that gives you a lot of road feel, then the Escape might very well be the SUV for you in that regard. So it's something that probably should be on your test drive list. Of course, the flip side of what I'm saying is that the Escape isn't as comfortable as cars like the Toyota RAV4 or the Volkswagen Tiguan or the Skoda Kodiaq or the Volvo XC40. It is quite a bit more firm and stiff. Partially that's because the Vignale I'm driving is on large wheels with lowish profile tyres, so we're going to get a bit more feedback. The base car or the ST line have chunkier tyres, smaller wheels. But that's just the way Fords are. It's the way they're set up, and that's the way their owners like them, and the Escape hasn't deviated from that path. I would say the previous car was actually a little bit more light on its feet. That being said, I drove a lot of those in small engine capacities with less weight over the nose, but this one feels a little bit more substantial, a bit heftier, but it's still pretty chuckable, which is encouraging. Now, if only Ford would build something like this for Australia with 7 seats, then it would be even more practical. After this point in the Ford lineup, you have to go up to the Everest, because they've just deleted the Endura, aka the Edge, from the lineup in Australia, and this couldn't be any more different to the Ranger-based Everest. This is like quite a premium European style SUV rather than a Ute-based 4x4, but there you go. In terms of safety, we've got a pretty good suite as standard. We've got AEB, we've got lane keep assist, we've got blind spot monitoring. This Vignale has all the toys, of course. There are cars in the class with more safety tech, but the Escape is pretty well kitted out, and there's a real quality feel to the car as well. So that's a detailed first look at the new Ford Escape, seen here in rather fancy Vignale trim. But the good news is that the Escape range is pretty egalitarian, because no matter which version you buy, you still get that high-powered 2-litre turbo, which really sets the Escape apart from most of its rivals that tend to have quite an underpowered engine at the bottom of the range before leading up to something a bit more special at the top. So if what you want is a driver's SUV with a fair bit of power, the Escape is a car you'd have to look at. But I'm keen to know what you think about this car, so let me know down below the video if the new Ford Escape is an SUV that will be on your shopping list. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.